What would the world be like if it was controlled by magic instead of technology? What would the world be like if it evolved to grow with magic and technology? That is
And
something a lot of authors have tried to tackle, Brandon Sanderson being one of them. And we're going to be talking tonight about one of his greater works that includes some magical technological advances.
and with that, welcome to the inaugural episode of the 800's. I am one of your hosts, Alex, and you just heard from our other host, Adam. And along with us behind the scenes is our tech man, Alan. We'll also be monitoring our chats.
And we're also going to shamelessly plug some things to you guys real quick. YouTube, we have a YouTube channel. It's DM's Table. Check it out. We post these videos and some other videos like our podcast. And also, if you're watching this video right now on YouTube, feel free to add in comments on the YouTube channel for some of the questions that we're going to ask tonight. We greatly appreciate hearing from you and getting some additional input on the story that we're about to discuss. Our main website is dmstable.com, and on there you'll find a page dedicated to Audible, which is our preferred audiobook listening platform. At dmstable.com/audible, you can find details about their subscription service and the ability to get a free month subscription and a couple of extra books and goodies and stuff like that. So check it out. And also, if you were with us for the pre-gaming session, you heard some music from Incompetech. That was Fearless First. Check out everything they have to offer at incompetech.filmmusic.io. And finally, Patreon is another website we have. Our patrons currently are going to be voting on what book we are going to be reviewing / book reading next. That vote ends at 8:45. So if you want to have an input, join us today at Patreon and quick get a vote in there. Again, that ends at 8:45.
All right, so a quick introduction to this week's book, The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. It's the first book in the Stormlight Archive series, Dewey Decimal Designation 813.6. Originally released in 2010, it is a fantasy novel that is set in the world of Roshar. Roshar is beset by powerful high storms that shape the land as well as the creatures that inhabit it. High storms are also a source of magic and energy known as stormlight. The stormlight is used by the people of Roshar in currency, magic casting, technology, and warfare. The Way of Kings begins with the disbanding of the Knights Radiant, wielders of the powerful shard blades and shard plate, defenders against the desolation. Fast forward a few millennia, and the story primarily follows our three main characters: Kaladin, former surgeon turned warrior turned slave; Shallan Devar, daughter of an unassuming noble house and aspiring ward of the famous scholar Yasna Kholin; and finally Dalinar Kholin, High Prince of Kholinar, shard bearer, and noble warrior. The story rotates between each of their perspectives, as well as several other minor characters, and throughout the book, their seemingly separate lives slowly converge as they navigate war, politics, visions, betrayal, and long-forgotten magics.
All right, just two more things and we'll get the show rolling here. So what you guys should expect tonight is Alex and I will pose a question or topic for discussion. We'll talk about it a little bit amongst ourselves, and then we'll look at the comment section for any sort of comments that you guys might have added, or we'll look for things that you guys want to talk about, and we'll try and get to those. So yeah, just go ahead and comment right on the Twitch stream, and we'll check it out and try and include you guys as much as possible. But yeah, and then Alex has a quick disclaimer, and we'll get things rolling.
All right, just so you know off the bat, this is not intended to be a kids show. We are aiming it more towards adults. There are probably going to be adult themes in the books that we talk about, and while we don't intend to swear every other word, there probably will be some involved. So bring your kids along at your own discretion. Also, we're trying to build a supportive community where people can share their interests and hobbies, so please be nice or the ban hammer will be dropped. Uh, and if there are any themes that come up that you find disturbing or feel like we should have talked about, we probably avoided talking about them in the context of our own world because we want to keep our discussion to the context of the world of the book itself.
So to get things off, The Way of Kings. Alex, what were your first impressions of the book?
Oh boy, overwhelming was like the first thing I felt. I mean, it's a 1,000-page book, so there's a lot in it there, but it was almost in a good way because I felt overwhelmed in that there was just so much that I wanted to know about, because there's so many questions that I have, and for every one that gets answered, there's another one that pops up, and I think it's a really fun way to read a book is when it answers questions in a satisfying way, but also prompts new ones. What about you, Adam?
So yeah, I kind of agree with what you're saying there. For me, I guess what really stood out was like that scene with the assassin in white. You know, it's a very jump you into the story and just attack you head on with what's going on, who are the players here. Oh, this guy can walk on walls and he has a really cool sword that stabs through everything. You know, it's like it bombards you with stuff, and then, you know, at a snap of a page turn, all of a sudden everything's gone and you're back to the super basics, right? So that kind of, I forget what you call it, but like the way the author portrays that is something that I've always admired as a way to start a novel.
Well, it definitely has an exciting hook to get you pulled into the story. I think that is that exact prompt of why should I be invested in this book? And then there's like, oh, there's all this cool stuff that can happen. We'll talk a little bit more about that scene when we get into the details, but Brandon Sanderson does a really great job of giving just enough without giving everything away, so that he can take his time building his world, and it's so incredibly detailed. Uh, I felt like I was like walking through it the way he talks it. It's very easy to picture everything that he's talking about, and while that's amazing, I will caution that it is easy to get lost in that a bit as well. Maybe that's just me, but because there
Yeah.
is so much, if you get lost in it, you can sometimes forget about other things. But the other thing that makes it fun for is it's great for a second read because you can always go through and, you know, it's almost a completely different experience.
That's kind of like what LPAC Phantom was saying. You know, not sure. Marina was not sure what she needed to be paying attention to. There's definitely a lot going on. Right at the onset, he's like, "Oh yeah, there's magic, there's kings, there's princes, there's drunks at a table, not picking up a sword. Come on down,
I actually thought it was kind of interesting that he started the book with kind of like like a prologue to a prologue, setting kind of this mythos for the entire series. And you slowly learn more about that. Like you said, he hits you with the action sequence, and then it gets back into your pretty typical storytelling. And I can legitimately say I've never read a book that had a prologue to a prologue before in the first book of anything. But I found myself constantly going back to because I was checking things that I had been interested in, and as you said, Elpac Phantom mentioned that it's a series that lends itself to rereads, and it absolutely does. I personally want to continue the series, so I will probably wind up being a while before I go back again, but I'm almost certain that I will.
Yeah. What I liked about it too is same thing that Mrs. Skolart said here. There's never really a boring part. Kind of keeps you going. Like even if it's just a ton of stuff, there's always something being explained right around the corner. So it's like just continuously going, what's that? Oh, that's that. Oh, wait, what's that? Oh, that's that. Yeah, okay. I get it. Okay.
It was a little frustrating, I admit, in the beginning, because there's a lot that you just don't understand, and you keep thinking, did I miss something? Because there's so much going on, and as you go through, you slowly pick up these things. You're like, oh, I didn't miss it, and then by the time you start getting enough of those hints, you're well into the depths of the book, which, I think that's really how it sucks you in. Is it? He does one thing perfectly that I don't think I've had too many other authors that do, and that's he balances answering questions with raising them. I know I mentioned this before, but it's so easy to pose a lot of questions and then just frustrate your readers until the end, and then it's so hard to satisfy them because it's either been built up to the point of it being huge expectations, or which can make it very easy to be unsatisfying, or it loses importance throughout the book, and he never does either of those things. And with a 1,000-page book, man, that is one heck of a task.
Yeah, no joke about that. So moving on here, literary value. Did this book suck you in? Did it draw you in and make you want to continue reading all the time?
Absolutely it did, especially in the beginning. I will admit there was a little bit of a lull in the middle, like in the early parts of like the main story, where I wanted a little bit more because they'd given so much at the beginning and it takes time to get there. But once it hit its stride, I would say probably only like maybe 5 or 6. I can't remember exactly where. It's more or less when one of our main characters, Kaladin, has his first go as one of the bridge crew.
Yeah.
That it really started to draw me in. So it absolutely did, and it sucked me in a way that I'm going to be continuing the series. So
Yeah. By the way, everybody, this is Alex's first read through. He has not read
yes.
the other books in the series. I've read all of the books in the series. I started Dawn Shard today. I have not finished it. I have opened it, but I have it. So, but all the other books, yes. So no spoilers for Alex. Don't post anything about Words of Radiance, Oathbringer, Edge Dancer, or Dawn Shard in this chat.
Yes, please, no. Feel free to hint at stuff, but I'm probably going to get mad if you drop spoilers that are too bad, because we're only spoiling up to the book that I've been through.
But I gotta say, for me, like, it's hard to remember back to my first read through. Well, really listen through, because I'm a diehard audiobook guy these days. But I distinctly remember a time where I was listening and it cut to a backstory, and I was like, oh man, now I've got to listen to all this, and now I'm not going to do anything today because I'm going to listen to all this again. And which really surprised me too, because for me, those backstories were like, at first they were an unnecessary pull away from that main story where I was like really invested and I wanted to know what happened next. But then you know, the more and more I got into it, the more and more I was like, okay, what happened? How did Shallan get here? Okay, who killed Shallan's dad? Who killed Shallan's mom? What happened? And that's something that I loved about Brandon Sanderson specifically, is he made me care about a backstory more than any other author ever has.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Maybe not more than any other author. I've had a few that do that, but it is a subtle art that not many manage to accomplish, especially with flashbacks, because flashbacks can very easily become tiresome or tedious. It feels like they're kind of just doing story exposition without actually accomplishing anything narratively. And he does both somehow, which is, again, very rare and something I very much appreciate. And I think our chats also mentioned that Shallan is probably one of the slower parts, and it's not her backstory, it's her main parts, at least in the beginning.
Yeah, I would agree with
And,
that.
you know, I think one of the things though that you have to appreciate about it though is he does a good job of still world building within it. You don't appreciate it until later, but it's definitely there. And I am glad that I paid attention despite how hard it was to get through, because again, that's actually what I'm referencing with it being a little bit slow in the beginning, for the most part anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta say a lot of comments are about, it draws you out of your boring work day, Mrs. Skolart. That's my wife, by the way, everybody. A lot of Shallan's kind of boring. AJ. I would agree with those though, that for me it was all about the Kaladin story, right? His story is really exciting at first, and then you get the Dalinar parts later where all of a sudden you realize, okay, this guy's got, he's gonna be the guy in the future, so we should probably pay attention to what's going on with him.
Yeah, I was a little surprised at how long it took Dalinar to get into the book, considering he's one of the main characters. But he sort of dominates a good chunk of the middle part, so I was okay with it. And the parts that he had were pretty good. I could take or leave some of the politics stuff, but I understand why it's there. It sets up his visions and why they're important. But at the same time, it's so hard for me to stay invested in politics related stuff when it's within a book. I tolerate them typically when they're in the context of fantasy or sci-fi. I'm glad that Sanderson didn't lean too heavily on them.
Yeah.
But like, again, it is important because his visions are constantly telling him you must unite them, and they had to show that there was some level of discord between what are essentially tribal lords that, like, states that are barely united by a king.
Mm-hmm.
And despite this visage that they are united, there's something bigger that they need to be drawn together for.
Yeah. I want to snag a comment up here and kind of riff off that. VS Drake, is he crazy? If we want to move into plot points, man versus reality / man versus God. Is Dalinar insane? Are these visions that he's receiving during high storms a figment of his imagination? Are they from God? He finds out in the visions that God's dead. So is that really the case? Alex, to you, what did you think going through your first time when you were experiencing Dalinar's doubt of these visions?
I didn't think he was insane. I thought he was misinterpreting them, which actually turned out more or less to be the case. I did not see it coming what it ended up being, though. Uh, like, but it was the thing is that what his misinterpretation was the most human and relatable thing I think I've ever seen in a fantasy book in my entire life. Oh, he wasn't actually talking to me. Like, that's the entire thing. And I felt that at the core of my being.
It's like responding to somebody when they're on the phone.
Or like when you wave at somebody and because like somebody waves at you and you wave back and they're really waving to the person behind you. I mean, he was talking to an answering machine message. That's really what it was.
Yeah.
Like a visual answering machine. But I honestly like that because it makes sense. If you're God and you're about to die, you're about to extinguish from existence, how do you make sure that your words make it out there? You just send it out into the void and just let it hit whatever.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, you can send it in a direction, but
yeah. I was going to tell you something about it, but then I remembered that
doesn't happen yet.
Well, there's more about the visions in the next couple books. So
I'm glad there is, because I do want to know more about like why it was sent. Was it targeted directly at a certain time? Because I know it wasn't at him, because God says specifically or the Almighty says specifically in the visions that I don't know exactly who you are, but I know you're there. Whatever you choose to do with this, here's the information, but you must unite them. Read the book. Read the book. Spread the words.
I personally think the visions were a really cool way for Brandon Sanderson to be like, okay, let me smack down some lore for you real quick. Let me lay the ground rules for how the Knights Radiant work without it being too awkward. So it was kind of a cool way for him to handle it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that often that you actually get interactions with gods that are like a god that's dead. I mean, I know we see that stuff in like Norse and Greek mythology, gods dying, but their interactions are typically between each other. Sending that out to the mortals is not something that you see all that often, which I thought was a fairly unique way to handle it. I will reserve my full judgment for when I find out more about it, though, because I'm a little skeptical about what prompted him to send it there then, and there's still a little mystery surrounding how the Almighty actually came to end.
Yeah.
So, like, that's
I don't recall what book explains his end. AJ, you mentioned there's interludes that others are experiencing the visions too. I must have missed that despite my 6 or 7 times through this book.
I remember vaguely somebody else talking about visions. I didn't realize that they were the same ones, though. I mean, it makes sense that it's kind of a message to the void. I just don't know how much direction was on it. Like, is this something that's been echoing for the last however millennia since the last desolation, or is this something that was more directly sent? But I want to kind of move on to like another topic.
Yeah, what you got?
I want to talk a little bit more about some of the general themes that were running throughout this book. I know that, again, this is why I did this in the disclaimer. I want to talk about like the racism and classism that permeates this book. It's based on eye color, of all things. It seems to have originally correlated to if you have the Stormlight power, your eyes would be lighter. And then kind of devolved into this singular point of if you have lighter colored eyes, then you were meant to rule. And it's kind of a theme throughout his book. Throughout this book, is unraveling those misconceptions of the racism, the classism, even a lot of their traditions. When you talk about how the Ardents enforce rules, specifically, I think Hoyt is actually the one who upsets it the most when he tells that story to Kaladin through the flute.
Yep.
Where he's just like, what happened? He tells a story about how there were people who killed anybody who did anything wrong on their island because that's what their emperor told them to do. And then they come to find out that this emperor has been dead for hundreds of years, and all of a sudden the responsibility was no longer on the emperor, it was on themselves.
Which it always.
Well, yeah, and it comes down to that level of responsibility and honor, which again is such a huge theme throughout the book as well.
Yep.
What did you think were some good representations of that? Like representations of honor and unraveling of misconceptions.
Well, to kind of riff off of your eye color thing, it's mentioned a couple of times that some other areas in the world ignore the eye color rule. I think I want to say it was Rock's homeland specific. Yeah. But it is kind of cool to see a world that is built off of more than just one ruling dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the Alethi that have the high princes and all that. You've got the I'm blanking. The rock people. Rocks people who live in the mountains who worship Spren, and they have their own way of doing things with like the whatever number of sibling you are is your job and stuff. So it's really cool in my mind to see Horn Eaters. Thank you, dear wife, for putting that in there. That's not really their technical term, but
dude, that's what I was.
That's what they're referred to as, but that's like their slang.
Hold on, it sounds Hawaiian. Unkalaki, I think.
Unkalaki.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, go ahead and try and pronounce his name though. Like his real name.
The Horn Eaters, or Unkalaki, as they refer to themselves, are a race of people in the world of Roshar. Yes, Unkalaki.
But yeah, I really like that too, that there are definitely other systems out there in the world, and that's another thing that I want to know more about. How do these other people live and operate? And it sounds like they're setting up for that a bit based on how the book ends with Zeth going to his most recent master's bedside and finding out that he's been trying to upset the Alethi hierarchy.
Yeah.
And, I mean, well, and it also, the other thing is, it also sounds like there are groups out there that transcend the nations as well. So there's just so much setup in this book, like, that I'm excited for, and yet it accomplishes so much, which is and to answer Elpec Phantom's question, I listened to the book, and what I did is I had a summary sheet from the Stormlight Archives wiki as just like supplementary reading, mostly so that I could see the names. Because a lot of them you just hear, and there were some that I would have been mispronouncing if I hadn't have looked it up. I do think that the next read that I do is going to be actually reading, though, because I've just found that I retain it a little bit better. That way, it's a lot to take in from just audio. I mean, if you do it 6 or 7 times, maybe. but
I plan on doing a read through of this specific book myself my next time. I'll be doing it with my leatherbound copy whenever it ordains to arrive. Yes. But back to the book. One of the other conflicts that I thought was kind of interesting and wanted to talk about real quick. Sorry, I'm just pulling it up. Tien. So not his main tragic story, but there's that one scene during the weeping where, in the backstory, so Kaladin's a kid.
Yeah.
He's sitting on the roof, and Tien brings him a stone, and he says, "Look how pretty this stone is." And Kaladin's like, what do you? It's just a stone, dude. And he's like, "No, look at it." He goes, "What? Like, what?" And he looks at it and he goes, "Actually, oh yeah, if you hold it up just right, the light reflects in it, and it has this really cool pattern inside." And I think that's a really small moment that is really intricately involved with what Kaladin struggles with and needs to learn. Is like, you can't just look at something and call it a stone. You need to understand that it has its own beauty just for being a stone, and it can be unique. It doesn't have to just be a stone.
Yeah, understanding that everything is meant to be what it is, and what it is more than what we perceive. And so that's something I actually want to post to our chat is, what is a relatively small moment in the book that had something that resonated profoundly with you? Let us know in the chat what you think of when you think of that for the story. We'd love to see what comes up for you. For me, I think, well, one of them I've already brought up was that little fable, or what's the term I'm looking for? That story that Hoyd gave through the flute.
I think you got it right, fable. Call it a fable.
There's another term for it. I can't remember exactly, but I think the other small one is, I think, one of the biggest ones was when Syl, the spren that follows Kaladin around, showed up right as he was about to take his step off into the honor chasm, and she came back with something. What are the little plants called? I keep forgetting the name of them.
Night something.
Yeah. Well, she comes back with this little plant that Kaladin had asked her to find as a gift to him, to get him to pause. Completely oblivious to the fact that she had brought him something that was one of the deadliest poisons in the entire book, or in the entire world, really. But she brought him something that she wanted. She did something for him. It was a little act of kindness that got him to step back from the precipice. And I thought that was like a really profound gesture of sometimes what it can take to get people to think again about their actions, whatever they may be, particularly when they have profound consequences. And it was probably one of the more emotionally charged portions of the book for me, just because of how subtle it was, but course altering it is for the main character.
Yeah, it's like this. Syl does this small unassuming gesture where she's like, oh, I just think this little thing might help,
Yeah,
and to her it's just this little thing, but to Kaladin it's like it represents so much to him, right? It
yeah,
represents will to fight, his drive to protect, and well, essentially everything that he's lost in the past, he can gain so long as he doesn't give up. So, yeah, I agree completely. That's a huge moment in the book, and it's always one of those like gotta if you're listening at work, you got to make sure you're still working moments.
yeah. I definitely had to take a pause on that one. I was actually on technically my second read through. Just prior to that point, I restarted just because I had been too distracted reading it. But in my second read through, I was getting a little too much into work, and then that scene started, and I just, even though it was supposed to be working, I just stopped.
Yeah,
And now, luckily, I work from home, and my hours are semi flexible on certain parts of it. But I had to pause, do my work, and come back because I had to be that invested in this. Is it had to be the only thing that I was doing, and it was just for a small moment. Which, I always appreciate books that can bring something that powerful to the table. Uh, another major part that in our chat, VS Drake brought up was uh, when Sil finds out that she's an honor sprint, which is honestly one of my favorite parts too, is
yeah,
finding out what she actually is, because she doesn't fit the mold, and actually goes to what you brought up, Adam, these perceptions of things, first perceptions not necessarily being all that they are, because she's originally thought to be a wind spren, and then she turns out to be an honor spren, and I'm not sure what the full implication of that is, but honor being such a huge theme in the book, I have a feeling that it's incredible. She has access to incredible power, or has a connection to it, because that's what Spren are. Is they have a connection to certain things in the world, whether that be death, rot, fire, rain, storm, um, even abstract concepts like, again, honor, or humor, or artistic ability. And it's really cool to see her transform in a way that they don't, which leads me to believe that she has access to something bigger or greater for whatever reason. I'm not entirely sure because I haven't read any of the other books, but I have a feeling it's going to have some pretty profound consequences for the book series moving forward. Uh, I do know that she is responsible for the powers that Kaladin started accumulating towards the end of the book. So again, I wonder though, are there other kinds of Spren that are able to do that? Are they kind of like the Parshmen, who they find out later are, well, Shallan says that they are Voidbringers. I don't think they necessarily are, or they haven't completed the transformation. Maybe they're just kind of like larvae to the fully transformed Voidbringers uh, butterfly, or what have you. But
yeah. There's definitely some more lore about that you'll find out in the next couple of books there.
oh yeah, VS Drake brought up the her stand against the Death Spren. That was a really powerful moment. Like, I would, that's the kind of thing that I would be, if this turned into a movie that, or a series, that I would be so looking forward to seeing, is just, this little figure of light standing guard over Kaladin, who's literally on the verge of death, against these dark spirits that are attracted to the end of life. Like,
Yeah,
it seems like a mini epic in and of itself.
And as Mrs. Scollard brought up the high storm moment, so Kaladin gets strung up for screwing up the army's approach to the battle. And Syl stood in front of the high storm like she was going to stop it. This is long before Syl knows anything about herself, but she still knows that she's got to protect Kaladin somehow. And even though she can barely even lift a leaf, she stands in front of Kaladin like, I got this. I will protect you.
Okay. Yeah, that was such a cool moment. And while we're on the idea of Spren, the figures that Shallan sees that have these symbols for faces, the ones that she draws and sees in her dreams, are they related to Spren? Please feel free to spoil this. Like, don't get into detail. Just answer the question: are they related to Spren?
Okay, repeat the question again.
Are those symbol-headed figures that Shallan sees in her dreams and draws, like accidentally, they're the ones that she sees right before she soulcasts for the first time without using the soulcaster?
Yep.
When she turns that cup into blood, are they related to Spren? Or similar to in some way? Like,
Well,
I don't.
I would say
Elpac Phantom says yes. Ha.
they're not really related. They are Spren, yes.
Oh, okay. They're just like they were so. Okay, so that actually does confirm my theory then that there are more like Syl. I don't want to go beyond that because I want to wait for the book. It's just that correlation between them lending a power to somebody, each of them lends a power to somebody else, made me think that they're connected in some way.
Yeah, that's something I like about the Spren too. Is you've got the I don't know what you would call them, that like the elemental Sprens, right? So like
Yeah.
the flame Sprens when they look like flame.
Yeah.
And then you got the wind Spren, but like, what does wind look like? Right? How do you depict a wind Spren? And then you've got the Shallan's mystery Spren, like, what are they depicting? What could those possibly be? You know? I think she calls them symbol heads, right?
Yeah, something like that. I have to assume they have like a different name, like maybe I don't know. Given the fact that they're related to soul casting, it makes me want to think soul sprens, but I don't know what the symbols would be in relation to that. So, hieroglyphic spren, I don't know. Or what are the symbols on Kaladin's head called again? Why am I blanking on it?
It's slavery brands.
Well, it's a symbol. It's basically their writing symbol. Glyphs.
Oh, the
Glyphs. Glyphs spren. Like that's the closest I would. That's what I would probably call them.
Thanks, AJ.
They don't mention Night Radiance groups unless you're talking about the heralds. Other than that,
I'm pretty sure they kind of go into it in like the after the story. There's a whole bunch of indexed stuff.
I did not get into the index stuff aside from the very beginning of it because that was one that I wanted to read like physically. Mm-hmm. Because there was no way I was going to retain any of that listening to.
Well, some knowledge that isn't spoilery but is about the Knights Radiant is there are 10 forces at play.
Okay.
And each order of Radiance shares the forces across. So each Radiant would have access to two of the 10.
Mm-hmm. And
one of those forces is essentially soul casting.
Okay.
So
that kind of makes sense. That's a pretty typical magic system type of thing where you have limited access to either related or similar types, but um, I'll definitely have to do some more reading on that. It probably is going to answer a few questions for me that I have about how the magic system works. And that's actually one of the things that I am most curious about, though, is to see the extent to which this magic works, because Brandon Sanderson is known for being a master of creating a hard magic systems. I've read his Mistborn series before, and that was one of my favorite fantasy magic systems that I've ever read about. And this one has so much potential. I'm looking forward to reading more about what it can do aside from things like surge binding and uh, a little bit of soul casting. Like it'll be cool to see what happens as the characters develop, because it sounds like much like the Parshmen and Parshendi are kind of transforming into the creatures of the desolation. It sounds like the other side, powered by Stormlight and Spren, is starting to gather power as well.
Yep. So I think that's kind of a cool talking point. Is Stormlight? Stormlight is obviously the main magic of the story, but it's utilized in two different ways. You've got the Fabrials and you've got the Knights Radiant. So, as a question to post to everyone, what this is kind of a weird way to phrase it, I guess, but what do you think is the more useful way to use Stormlight? Fabrials or essentially what Night Radiants do?
I mean, personally useful, like day-to-day stuff, it's got to be the Fabrials. But if you're talking grand epic stuff, it's got to be the way the Knights Radiant do it. It's completely unnecessary for the vast majority of what happens in daily life to have these incredible powers. Like they're good for things like war and murder, and for creating grand scale types of magic, but that isn't what daily life is about. And the fact that they turned it into currency of all things, like but it's currency because it's useful. Like what are each, because I do know that each of these gemstones in their currency is associated with a different type of magic, which I assume has something to do with the 10 types that you were talking about earlier.
Mhm.
And these, I just think that's a little more useful for the daily life stuff. So I guess it just depends on context for me. What about you?
Yeah, I think you've got it right on the noggin, which is kind of, I don't know, it was probably a bit of a leading question, but Knights Radiant are very obviously useful during wartime, right?
Mm-hmm.
They swing swords that cut through everything and can do cool things like walk on walls,
Leap
or
chasms in a single bound.
I don't even need to leap. Or soul cast at will,
Oh,
um, stuff like that. But at the same time, Fabrials in their own, as something that AJ kind of brought up in his most recent comment there, you can create a Fabrial and just hand it to someone, and now all of a sudden, they can send messages across the world. They can heat their home. They can, I'm trying to think
create
of other
food.
Fabrials. Yeah, like the soul casters are Fabrials, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you hand a soul caster to somebody, train them on it, and all of a sudden now they can turn stone into grain or whatever the conversion is for that one. So in my opinion, and by useful I meant like in like an overall good for the world way.
I mean, again, context. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're talking about things like the desolation, good for the world is the ability to stop the desolation.
I think I think a lot of the fabrials are intended to replicate things that were potentially things that Knights Radiant might have been able to do, but
Mhm.
they give that power to the everyday man. So you don't need some special 1 in a million person to be on hand to do these cool magical things.
Yeah, there is that to some extent. Obviously, there's only certain people who can charge it, but that's still far more people than, the extremely limited uh, knights with their shard blades and shard plate. Now, I know we're getting kind of towards the end here, so I want to cover like kind of rapid fire through some of the major plot points. I know we've briefly talked about Zeth killing the king, which sets off the war in uh, between the Parshendi and the Alethi. Uh, we've talked a little bit about how Shallan, she had a bit of a slow start because she's basically going to try to steal a soulcaster and winds up finding out that she doesn't even need it. And neither does her teacher or the person that she wants to be her teacher anyway. We didn't get a lot into the politics, but I think it's important that we talk about what happened quickly with Dalinar.
So as a question,
Yeah.
what do you want to talk about Dalinar?
How would you have handled it in his how would you handle this responsibility of what he sees in his visions, like if you were him? Like not
So
not just was he crazy, but like how would you have handled it knowing that your goal is to unite these people whose sole goal in life is to one up each other?
I think that's a fair question, especially because that's not something that is similar to like how we think, right?
Yeah.
So
Want to get people to get to think in the minds of the character a little bit.
so hmm. I guess if it were me, if I were Dalinar, I don't know. I think I would have been more forceful than what he did. He tried to do a lot of politicking, and that's definitely not his strong suit. And I mean, obviously, it didn't really work out for him in the end. So, but to me, I think he should have gotten an ally, either the king or one of the other high princes, which he kind of did with Sadeas. But he should have gotten one ally, and he should have just been like, all right, well, me and this person are going to do this. If you guys don't, we're going to change our minds and go F you guys over. So you're going to have to deal with it because I've got these visions from maybe God, maybe not God.
Personally, I think he handled it about as well as could be expected, because if he tries to brute force it, like that just triggers these guys who their whole deal before the Parshendi War was fighting with each other. They have those war games more or less that they deal with, and that's just gonna activate that reflex to go to war. I don't think they would have backed down from it. It had to be something different. Uh, Granted, I think he probably could have been a little more assertive about getting allies sooner. I think it was smart to bring the king in on it, and I especially liked when he brought in Navani, I believe, the widow of the fallen
Gavilar.
king, and you know, like I could take or leave the romance between them, but you know, we'll see if that turns into anything worthwhile. But I think it was smart to bring in somebody who was well respected, who could bring in bring in a different perspective of his visions, because that's the other thing we didn't talk about, is the fact that his visions are not just in his head. He's acting these things out. He's speaking in tongues, and they didn't even think, oh, this could be something else. Again, it gets back to that theme that we were talking about, but I think he handled it mostly as well. I think he could have done certain things faster if he had started thinking outside the box. I think he tried to play by their rules for too long. And I think that's how he could have been a little more assertive, but I don't think that he did anything. I don't think that being aggressive would have been the right move.
Yeah, but you're forgetting one essential aspect of that. He's the Blackthorn.
That's what gives him clout to begin with. That's why they respect him. Like, that's already built in. Now, it would have been cool to see the Blackthorn activated on the battlefield sooner. I mean, you don't see it until the very end. But yeah, he's definitely
right. The dude is a sleeping badass.
yeah, but like all he had to do is show him that he woke up, have an ally. Like, I don't think it had to be directed at the other Alethi high princes to do that, though. I think it was more of a show of force so you remember who I really am, and then maybe be a little more assertive with figuring out. I think he got a little too caught up in perceptions about what his visions implicated. I see the caution, but I probably would have been at least brought somebody in other than his son, who clearly thought he was nuts, a bit sooner. Like, get another referral, dude. All right, so do we want to quickly get into final impressions and predictions before we wrap things up?
We're probably fine continuing on for a while longer.
All right, as long as you're okay with it. I know that you were feeling like you had a bit of a long day, so I'm totally down to keep talking about stuff, man. I'm having a lot of fun with this, and it was not fun having to wait a week to talk about this.
So something I do want to talk about that V.S. Drake just brought up, the thrill.
Yeah.
So that's something that Dalinar mentions is something that is commonly felt but not talked about in the book. So without speaking to spoilers in future books, what do you think about the thrill?
That was interesting to me, mostly because it was constantly juxtaposed with that sort of wretched feeling that he had when he would see the faces of the people that he killed. In particular, like that young Parshendi, he looks into his eyes. He talks about how they have the same expressions as people. The only difference is the red skin and the armor-like carapace that they have growing in their bodies. And I think that's something that you don't typically see in a lot of these grand heroic characters, is any sort of remorse for what they do. But they lean into that thrill aspect of, like, for honor, for glory, whatever, or just the thrill of the battle. And I actually like that he doesn't let that completely dominate his thoughts all the time, and he accepts the fact that he does have some remorse about this. It makes him think about these things again, and it also makes you realize that no matter how different the enemy is, you're still killing a living being, and presumably intelligent beings, when it comes to war. And I actually like that juxtaposition. It made me feel uncomfortable, but I think it was intentionally made to make you feel uncomfortable. Because
Yeah, I think, yeah, with like the uncomfortable factor, right? With that one time where Dalinar is on the battlefield and I think what brought him out of the thrill was it dawned on him that the Parshendi pairs might be male and female.
Mm-hmm.
It like takes him out of it for a sec. Oh no, sorry, I think it was like a youth or something. So
Yeah, it was a youth, but like he also talks a little bit. I thought about pairs.
mm-hmm.
Uh,
He's pulled out of the thrill, right? And then he looks back and he sees the line of carnage that he's left behind him, and he's like, "What have I done?" But in the moment, he was like, "Yes, I'm doing good stuff. I'm just gonna keep killing everybody in front of me." Yeah.
yeah, I think they did a nice job of that. Well, I say they. I mean, Brandon Sanderson does a nice job of kind of taking us out of I think the thrill is not just for him. I think it's a bit of a call out to the reader. I mean, think about it. When you see these epic battle scenes in movies, in books, and everything, and you get sucked into them, there's a bit of a thrill for us too, because these are, it's a bit of fantasy fulfilled, because we could never actually do those things in real life, but at the same time, it's still killing, even if it's fantastical. And I think he's specifically trying not to desensitize us as well as Dalinar.
That's a good insight to that. I didn't really think about it like that, but
Like
yeah,
it worked on me.
Right?
Yeah, it does. And it definitely worked on me, because I remember thinking, yeah, these are such cool action scenes. I'm loving this because we're finally seeing him let loose. And then he has that moment, and I was just like, dude. Like, I had to take a second, and I don't know if anybody else experienced that specifically, but I hope that's something that continues.
Like that, but you're totally right. Yeah.
I hope it's something that continues, because that's the other thing that I started to kind of get the feeling about shard blades towards the end. Not the honor blades that the heralds had, but regular shard blades. It felt like they had a kind of corruptive nature to them, like an absolute power corrupts absolutely type of nature to them, and you have to be careful about it, because that's why it was such a big deal that Kaladin rejected getting it, not once but twice. He had 2 opportunities to pick it up, and he never does. And I know it's because he doesn't like the light eyes and what they represent.
I think you're right too there, right? Because what's his old commander's name? I feel so not knowing this.
Gaz, or are you talking about the one back when he was actually a soldier?
One who took his blade.
I don't remember. Whoever it was that basically killed his entire group and then sent him off as a.
Yes, that guy.
I know who you're talking about. Is that Amaram? Is that Amaram?
Yes, yeah. Amaram.
I was trying to write that out.
Yeah.
So
I remembered it because I remember it because partially because you had it here, but right before I read it on our little note-taking thing, I was like, oh yeah, the guy that I initially called a Ramaram.
So, right, Amaram takes the sword from Kaladin and feels justified in his actions because he can put it to better use.
Yeah.
So he thinks he's a better person to wield that power.
Because of all the lives that he can save. But at the same time, how many lives did he extinguish just so that he can have it?
Yes. So I think that's kind of a good point that you bring up that might be foreshadowing for future actions in the book series.
Yeah. I mean, I specifically left out the honor blades because they talk about them differently. Like in the couple scenes that you talk about them with the heralds in the beginning and a bit towards the end, they just have a different a tone to the way they talk about them. They doesn't even the characters that wield them don't seem to have quite the same issues that you see with some of the other characters, which I wonder what happened to those blades and if they got passed down, because it seems like at least the ones that Dolinar and his son starts with an A, huh?
Adolin?
Yeah, Adolin. The ones that they wield seem to at least have less of that effect. It's not that they don't have it, just less, or maybe it's just maybe it's just them because that's their family and whatnot. It's hard for me to tell for sure, but I don't know. I have a feeling like those blades are going to pop up again at some point, and they're going to have a slightly different nature than your typical shard blade.
That's good insight. I like the way you're thinking on that. Can't really comment on it. There's a lot of spoilery stuff going on there that I can't talk about. So,
well, we talked about this. I'm going to be doing most of the predictions on this one because I haven't read it before.
So anyway, moving on. Why don't we? Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead if you want to talk about.
Well, world hoppers got brought up in the discussion. I'd like to quickly touch on that. And Hoyd, who I correctly recognized from the Mistborn series, incorrectly recognized his job. But and this is another thing you can feel free to spoil on. The Cosmere, is that kind of like the multiverse for Brandon Sanderson books?
Yep.
And those three dudes who are looking for him in one of the interludes, they're other world hoppers, aren't they? It's like one of the first interludes. There's three guys, and they specifically said they're looking for Hoyd. They're the only ones who call him by a name that isn't the King's Wit.
Nope, I don't.
Or somebody that Hoyd specifically. Yeah, maybe the chat can answer that one for me. Are the three guys searching after Hoyd in one of the original interludes, are they also world hoppers? Distinctly not a multiverse, it's a shared universe. Oh, which leads me to another one of my predictions. Humans on this world, I don't think that they originated from that world. I think the god is from another planet or world or something and brought them there. Because when you look at everything that this planet, which is shaped so heavily by the storms, the high storms, humans are the only things in that world that don't really have any defense against it, aside from like the shard blades and stuff. Or, everything else evolved, like heavy armor, or the grass retracts into the ground, all sorts of other things adapted to it, and humans just aren't. So I have a slight theory that they might not, like, whoever the Almighty isn't originally from that world.
That's pretty good insight. Let's pose a question so we can try and get some engagement here too.
Yeah.
So, let's keep it open-ended. Favorite part of the book? Go.
All right, you start off this one, man, while we wait for answers in the chat.
All right. So my favorite part is definitely the scene when Amaram betrays Kaladin. It's just because it's such a colossal moment that defines, exactly the kind of person that Kaladin wants to be and tries to be so hard, but at the end of the day, he just always finds one reason to not be that person, right? It's
Mhm.
I can't be that person because shards are bad. I can't be that person because I failed in the past. You know, he always has that one reason. And then Amaram just shows his true colors at last, right? Kaladin looks up to him for this whole stretch. He's willing to practically sacrifice his entire crew to save Amaram, and he's this huge jerk in the end, you know?
I actually want to kick it over to the chat, and then we can probably wrap up with mine once we've exhausted the chat, because I want to make sure everybody gets theirs in. Miss Skolart says her favorite part was when Kaladin got Bridge 4 off their asses and actually got them to work together and become a strong unit. Love that part. Like, you take these people who spirits are broken, they've got nothing, they're barely living
The dregs
from day
of
to
the
day. Dregs of the world, really, when you think about it, like aside from the Parshmen. And he got them to come together, unite for something, and gave them a reason to live. Like, it shows his leadership, it shows his commitment to people, and the fact that people actually recognize it. And you know, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, that's definitely a very powerful motivational moment. Well, chapters, very powerful motivational chapters. It's kind of cool how, you know, it doesn't matter who they were, it matters who they can be. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a cool way to look at it.
All right, so Alpac Phantom said that his favorite part was when Kaladin killed the Shard Bearer and when he went balls to the wall protecting the bridge at the end. Amazing, amazing action scenes. I love the part where the spear breaks. He grabs the tip out of the air, stabs him in the face with it.
And just really written out, right?
I know. That's like it. The thing is, like I said, one of my favorite parts about this is when I'm reading action scenes, when I'm reading descriptions of the world and the characters, I can see them. I'm there. They're so detailed and well written that it's almost visceral when you're experiencing it. And I remember hearing that part in the book and going, yes, like out loud. I wasn't even thinking.
Definitely. Then VS Drake Scott went ape shit and wears the carapace armor into the fight. And that was a cool kind of you can't give up kind of moment, right? He tried one thing before with the tilt the bridge thing, and it almost cost him his life and everybody he knew. And he wasn't afraid to try another thing and went absolutely bananas and decided, hey, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to take this armor from down into the chasm, the only kind I can find. I'm going to wear that. And, oh, actually, it's got this cool side effect of making the Parshendi really pissed off at me. So,
yeah, and then what he built from that too is this thing that allowed him to preserve lives. And admittedly, he didn't know at the beginning that he was using his powers to augment its effectiveness. But once he did, it becomes this very powerful means of fighting their enemy. I will admit, I felt bad for Shen the whole time, freaking out because they're touching the dead. Like, every time he describes Shen sitting there, just like he wouldn't even look at him, I was just like, poor dude. Like, like, it's the one thing that those guys care about at all. Now, why they care about it, I'm a little curious to find out, like, why it's so important to them. I have a feeling it has something to do with how they transform from Parshmen into Voidbringers, but that's just a mild theory of mine.
yeah, we'll see where it takes. Dalinar giving up his blade. I love that moment too, just because, like, the whole book, you talk about how everybody wants a shard blade. It's the only thing you hear about is, oh, I'm gonna go and join the army because maybe I'll get a shard blade and my eyes will become light and I'll be a light eyes and I'll come back a war hero and yada, 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 right? And
Mhm.
oh, by the way, the light eyes, they want shard blades too because it just means more prestige for them. And Sadius, he wants a shard blade. He doesn't have one yet. And then Dalinar, going against everybody else, gives up his blade for people, for slaves, for the dregs of society. And
Well,
just the way he words that, right, too,
yeah.
where he says, in his estimate, a shard blade is priceless. And he asks Kaladin, how much value would you put on a human life? And Kaladin says, a human life is priceless. He goes, well,
Sounds like I made a good deal. Look who came out on top. No, I love that. I love that transformation too. I think that's when Dalinar fully sheds any attachment that he has to the old world order. You know, because like, I say old world order, but I mean like the current world order for the Alethi. I think that's when he finally was like, all right, all pretense is out the window. I'm doing my own thing, period. Like, I know he does a little bit before then, but it really didn't sink in for me that he had fully committed to it until that moment.
Yeah. I see later Alpac Phantom mentioned Sadius saying a life is worth about 2 emerald bromes. So it's priceless. So that's, yep.
Well, it's a matter of perspective, and I think the whole point is they want to shift the perspective from Sadeas's to Dalinar's and Kaladin's, and I really hope that becomes a thing as we go forward with that series. Also, my dog wants to say hi.
Okay.
Hi, buddy. He was groaning because I wasn't giving him attention.
Very cute.
Yes, Puppers. His name is Copper. Give him all the love. He's old. All right, so my favorite moment, because I'm not seeing any other big ones coming up in chat. Again, I go back to the moments. I think all of my favorites are the little interactions between Syl and Kaladin. I'm going to choose a different one just because we've already talked about a couple. But I like that moment when they first meet. They haven't joined Bridge 4 yet, and she just appears for the first time, and he's already starting of thinking to do something stupid. It's the same thing over and over again. And she's barely speaking at this point, but she just gives him this like gentle little nod, like, I'm here, like, you're not alone. I can't remember the exact words that she gave, but like, again, it's just this subtle little hint of like, you're not alone, I'm here with you, try and find another way. And that's when he settles down, doesn't do the same thing that got him branded as a, well, not as a deserter, but like the same thing that got him kicked out of his last enslavement by running away and revolting. He was like, I've got to live for something, and it can't be the same thing over and over again. And
I've got to find an honorable approach to life.
yeah. And so I those are some of my favorites. And the other favorite one is probably, again, that one where he grabs the spear tip out of midair, stabs him in the face. I really hope we get something a little bit better out of Shallan, because I think she has the potential to be a really fun character. I think just there was so much setup going for her. She didn't really get a chance to shine the way that Dalinar and Kaladin did.
Yeah.
I mean, it was still good quality content for the most part. It's just not quite as epic as those two. So I hope she gets more. We get to see more of her because I do actually like her character. I like the way that she looks at the world. Like I like hearing how she views the world as she's drawing. Those are some of my other favorite little subtle bits.
Yeah, she's got like an innocent approach to everything when she takes out her drawing pad, which is kind of interesting, especially past book 1, but we won't get into that. Shall we talk about Zeth and his truthless status real quick?
Yeah, thank you, VS Drake, for bringing that up. I can't believe we didn't go over that a bit more. It is indeed heartbreaking because he hates killing so much, but he's basically forced to do whatever the whim is of whoever's holding his oath stone. And when people really know what he can do, all they want is the worst out of him, and he wants nothing more than for it to end. But he can't. And it really is a tragedy of epic proportions.
Yeah, so what do you think caused him to be branded truthless?
Oh, that one's a tough one because they kind of make it seem like it wasn't his choice. But I want to say it probably has something to do with his surge binding abilities. It was something he might have had. I can't tell if it's a chicken or egg type of thing where he got the truthless designation because he had access to the shard blade and the surge binding, or if he took those on to get access to them for another reason. Seems a bit like the former. That's my best guess. I don't have a really good one though, and I want to know.
So I think that's kind of one of the societies that isn't well explored yet is the Shin Society.
Yeah.
And I think that's very intentional because of reasons and whatnot. But I remember my first read through, I was always like, what's up with the Zeth guy? Like, I mean, he's so specific about his oath. Like he's got to follow it. It doesn't seem like it's a magical compulsion. It's just he follows it no matter what, based on his own drive to follow his oath, to be tied to that stone he carries around. So if that's the case, then truthless kind of sounds like a slap in the face, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I always thought, oh, truthless must mean this guy was a dreg of the society. He lied all the time. He cheated. He gambled, and he just was cast out of the Shin Empire or whatever they call it because of how horrible of a person he is. But at the same time, that doesn't exactly match how he acts in the book.
I always thought it was more of I got more of an orphan type of vibe to him, who was like the thing that came to mind is like when you think of like spy movies from where like Russian orphans are trained from birth to be like these mega spies type of deal. Like he's truthless because he has no origins. He has no truth to who he is. He doesn't like that's kind of the vibe that I got, that knowing your truth is knowing who you are, and he doesn't, or that was stripped from him in some way. Either he never had it or he was stripped from him. That's the feeling I got.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Don't,
Yeah, that's
yeah, it's hard to. I understand. It's hard to do without spoiling. I get it.
moving on. A lot of the comments about how he gets mad at people who can't stop him. I love that because, you know, he wants to be an honorable person, but he's being held by a dishonorable person. So
Yeah.
he gets mad when people can't stop him. And I love that in a villain because it makes them seem, you know, more real.
Yeah, that's actually not the most uncommon thing that I've ever heard of in certain villains. Like, I'll go to one of my favorite manga animes of all time, uh, One Piece. There's a main character called Kaido who can't die, and he gets mad when he can't kill himself and when other people can't kill him. He's not mad. He's not mad because they attack him. He's mad because they can't hurt him. And there's a few others that are vaguely coming to mind that I can't think of specifically, but I think for him it is so counter to how he feels. Like, he's the only character I've found that is so counter to how he feels about how he wants to live, is that honorable life that he wants to live, that he gets angry about it. Most of the time it's just like, I'm immortal, I want to die. His is, I'm not immortal, it's just you are weak and I need to die because I'm doing terrible things.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what makes it so heartbreaking, is that you know there's something powerful keeping him doing this, but you don't know what. And it has to be something huge for him to do something that's so counter to everything that he feels.
Yeah. All right. So wrapping up here, what were your final impressions of the book?
Whew, that's going to be a tough one to summarize. Final impressions, I think it is a book made for people like us. It's definitely a book for nerds who are willing to get through a lot, but to get a lot out of it. Do I think anyone can read it? But I don't think it's a book for everyone, just because you have to have a little patience with this book. And if you don't have patience with your books, you're going to have a hard time getting through this. But I will say this, for anybody who is willing to take on the challenge, it is far more than worth it. And I highly recommend that you push yourself outside of your comfort zone to try and get it done. It's a great book. I look forward to reading the rest of the series. Maybe we'll have another one or two on here down the road. I'd like to get other series mixed in too, but yeah, I loved it, and like I said, looking forward to reading the rest, and I would recommend it to anybody who likes to read. It's a book. It's a book reader's book.
It's a book reader's book. I don't care what kind of book you like. It's your book. Go read it.
Well, I mean, V.S. Drake brings up a point about reading it through audiobook, and yeah, that can definitely ease some of the burden, but it's still 45 hours. It's not, and to really appreciate what it's bringing to the table, you do have to engage with it. It's not something that you can just passively leave because you'll miss so much. You can have other things going on. It's just, it can't be like the third thing that you're doing. But I still would recommend it. And audiobook is definitely for the people who don't do quite as much hardcore reading. But yeah, like I said, I would definitely give it a read and recommend it to anybody who likes a good fantasy story.
Yeah, I've got to say, I really liked a lot of aspects of the book. Right, the magic system was really cool, really thought out. It's ingrained in society. Right, their technology depends on Stormlight. The fighting is unique to the book. It's not just, you know, copy Kings and Knights, paste Kings and Knights. It's, the Alethi do things this way and these people do things that way. It's a really unique fighting system in there, and the politics in and of its own are just absolutely bananas with high princes and kings and stuff, right? So there's a lot this book has to offer that other fantasy books just don't have. And I've said this to you before, Alex, but to me, Brandon Sanderson does an exceptional job at building up a world by telling it through the stories of his characters.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't write a book based off of this one character. He writes a book based off of this world, and these characters are in it. And it's something that a lot of our authors try to do, and not many can really hold a candle to what Sanderson is able to do. So mad props for him there, but I obviously love the book, so I'll stop gushing now.
No, I would have to agree about that point where he brings together these different viewpoints in a way that a lot of other people try, but they fail because it ends up getting muddled too much. And I think part of the reason why he succeeds so well, though, is that he slowly brings these characters together so that they're not completely disparate the entire time. They're just kind of closing in on each other, and by the end, everything kind of fits. There's still a lot of questions, but everything fits, and nothing feels left out or confusing in an I don't understand kind of way. It can be confusing, and there's a lot of information I need time to process kind of way, but it's, again, worth it. And the world building is stellar.
Yeah, and like Elpec Phantom said, it's a great standalone. It's better within the rest of its series, and even in read the Cosmere, right? So there's the Stormlight Archives, which is Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, Oathbringer, Rhythm of War, coming out in 10 days.
Free giveaway, by the way, on his Twitter.
Really?
Yeah, there's a giveaway that
Brandon Sanderson's.
Yeah, on Brandon Sanderson's Twitter.
Brando Sandos. Yep. I saw that today. I was like, later. I'm lazy.
Yeah, BRB.
Anyway, the other books in the Cosmere also give a lot to this book in and of its own. Like Alex mentioned earlier, he recognized Hoyd from the Mistborn series. Mistborn is part of the Cosmere. It technically happens in the same universe as Stormlight Archives. So it's a lot of cool stuff like that.
Yeah, dude is a machine when it comes to printing out books, though. I don't know how he does it. He lives and breathes writing, and you can tell it in his writing, though. I think that's part of what makes it so great.
But we're gonna start wrapping up and do all the boring stuff here. So first and foremost,
boring, but still, please stay tuned to it. We got some good
boring
stuff.
but important things. First off, thank you to everybody who participated tonight. We loved reading your comments.
You guys rock.
Yes, I read every single one that was posted. I'm sure Alex noticed sometimes while I was just staring at the screen, but
I made sure. I don't know that I read every single message, but I tried to read a good portion of it.
So definitely appreciate all you guys' input and
yes, thank you for making this such a successful launch.
Yes, I think it went pretty great. So other than that, you guys check out our YouTube DM's table. Just go to YouTube, type DM's table. We'll be right there. Also join our patron team to have a say in what we read next at patreon.com/DM's table. There you have a couple of different tier options, but the lowest should be able to get you in the door for voting on what book we will read. We're planning on doing a short story and a long story every month. So get in there on it. We also have a Discord chat that we like to chat about all things nerdy as well as books. If you want an invite for that, hit us up on our socials. You can find those on your screen in the bottom right corner. That's Facebook at the DM's Table and Twitter at DM's Table. So hit us up on both of those. Check out our posts. We try and post pretty regularly there. And if you like what you see, send us a DM and we'll get you that invite link over to the Discord. And as always, if you want to see all of our content in one neat and orderly place, check out dmstable.com, where you'll find links to everything that I just described anyway. Whew,
Yeah.
okay.
And also feel free to share, especially the YouTube, if you think anybody would be interested in the 800's or even just interested in this book. Please share far and wide with everybody you know who enjoys books, who enjoys sharing hobbies, because we'd love to have more people involved. You guys have been awesome, and we hope to expand on that community.
So our next books, as the polls have closed about 45 minutes ago, read by November 21, 2020. So we'll be doing 8 p.m. again on November 21, The Tomb by H.P. Lovecraft. It's another Lovecraft book. If you guys checked out our previous video, we did Cthulhu. So pretty excited to read that. I haven't read it before, so.
Nor have I, so it'll be fun to hash this out with somebody who hasn't. I'm pretty sure that our tech guy, Alan, has read it before, so.
Yes, probably. The other book, the long one, so this will be for December 5, 2020, The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This is another great author, big fan of him as well. This is not quite as big as a Sanderson book, but it is still a large fantasy novel.
So get started.
Yes. So start cracking on The Name of the Wind, and we'll discuss it on December 5th, again at 8 p.m.
This will definitely be a different discussion because it's one that both me and Adam have read before, but we look forward to discussing it with you. So again, get more people involved because we want to hear different points of view. We want to get you guys involved as much as possible.
Yeah, so thanks again for joining us tonight. It was great, and we hope to see you again in future streams.
Night all.
Good night.